From the tragic accident that almost crippled her to being turned into a punching bag by her husband while pregnant, Doris Day has no doubt gone through hell. But on TV screens, she was the perfect girl next door. Little did most of her fans know what was truly going on behind closed doors. We'll get to that. In case you don't know who Doris Day was, you're in for a treat. Doris Day, an icon. Born Doris Mary Ann Kappelhoff on April 3, 1922, she was an American actress and singer who took the industry by storm. Her journey began back in 1939 when she kicked off her career as a big band singer. Fast forward to 1945 and she hit it big with not just one but two chart-topping songs, Sentimental Journey and My Dreams Are Getting Better All the Time, thanks to her collaboration with Les Brown and his band of renown. But Doris wasn't just about the band life, she was ready to fly solo. She ditched Brown and embarked on a solo career that saw her record over 650 songs from 1947 to 1967. Talk about a powerhouse. In the 1950s and 1960s, Doris was one of the leading ladies of Hollywood. Her film career took off with the 1948 flick Romance on the High Seas, and from there she starred in a little bit of everything. Musicals, comedies, dramas, and even thrillers. Remember her as Calamity Jane in Calamity Jane, 1953? Or maybe you caught her in Alfred Hitchcock's The Man Who Knew Too Much, 1956, alongside James Stewart. She had some unforgettable on-screen chemistry with Rock Hudson, co-starring in 3 successful comedies, including the classic Pillow Talk, 1959, which even earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Actress. And let's not forget her appearances with the likes of Clark Gable, Cary Grant, James Cagney, and Frank Sinatra. She truly shared the screen with some of the biggest names in Hollywood. But she didn't just stop at movies. After hanging up her film boots in 1968, just as her star was shining at its brightest, she launched into television with The Doris Day Show, which ran from 1968 to 1973. Doris's talent didn't go unnoticed. She snagged a Golden Globe and the Cecil B. DeMille Award for Lifetime Achievement in Motion Pictures in 1989. Then in 2004, she received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. No big deal, right? And if that wasn't enough, she also grabbed the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2008 and a Legend Award from the Society of Singers. In 2011, she scored the Los Angeles Film Critics Association's Career Achievement Award, proving she was still in the game. Just when you thought she'd slow down, Doris released her 29th studio album, My Heart, in 2011, which was packed with new material and even hit the UK top 10. By 2020, she was one of only 8 recording artists to have topped the box office in the US 4 times. But now, to the not-so-glamorous parts you may not have known. The accident. On October 14, 1937, Doris Kappelhoff, then a bright-eyed 16-year-old dancer from Cincinnati, found herself in a starkly different world as she lay in a hospital bed at Mercy Hospital. Just hours before, she had been filled with dreams of a dazzling Hollywood future, preparing to take the leap into stardom. That dream now lay in shambles around her, shattered by a terrible car accident that had altered the course of her life. The night before the accident was supposed to be a celebration. Doris, along with her dance partner Jerry Dougherty, had just signed a 5-year contract with an organization that supplied dancers to the movie industry in Hollywood. They were ready to embark on a new adventure, leaving behind the familiar stages of the Netherland Plaza Hotel and the Cincinnati Club, where they had performed countless times. Friends had gathered for a farewell party at the home of Mr. Clarence Holden, offering well wishes and sending them off with dreams of success. Doris and Jerry felt unstoppable, fueled by the excitement of what lay ahead. But as fate would have it, the ride home from the party took a tragic turn. Doris, Jerry, and 2 other friends, Albert Schroeder and Marion Bonekamp, were in the car when it collided with a freight train at 5th and High Streets. The impact was catastrophic. In an instant, the bright future Doris had envisioned was turned upside down. After the crash, Doris was left lying on the parkway, surrounded by debris, her leg injured, and her dreams feeling distant. As paramedics arrived, the reality of her situation set in. "My leg is broken. My leg is broken," she cried out, her voice filled with fear and desperation as she was loaded into the ambulance. She pleaded for her mother, Alma Kappelhoff, who had planned to accompany her to Hollywood, knowing how much this meant to her daughter. In the chaos, Jerry rushed to her side, his concern palpable as he tried to assess the situation. When he realized the extent of her injuries, it broke his heart. For nearly 6 years, they had danced together, preparing for this moment, and now it felt as if everything had come crashing down. Despite the pain and fear, Doris tried to comfort him, assuring him that she would dance again. After the accident, the hospital staff examined Doris's injuries. They confirmed that she had suffered a broken leg, which would require at least 4 months of recovery. The news was a heavy blow to Doris, who had spent countless hours training in ballet and voice, preparing for her moment in the spotlight. She couldn't help but think of how close she was to achieving her dreams, only to be sidelined by this terrible accident. Doris's mother remained by her side, trying to keep her spirits up. She reminded Doris that they would have to wait until spring for their trip to Hollywood, a statement that felt like salt in the wound. Meanwhile, the other passengers, Albert and Marion, sustained various cuts and bruises but were otherwise okay, which was a small comfort in the aftermath of the crash. As days turned into weeks in the hospital, Doris grappled with her injury and the toll it took on her aspirations. While she was stuck in bed, her dreams of dancing faded like the sunlight outside her window. However, instead of letting despair consume her, Doris began to channel her energy into singing. She recognized that while her dancing career was on hold, her voice could still carry her to new heights. During her recovery, she immersed herself in vocal training, honing her talent and finding solace in music. This decision would ultimately set the stage for a remarkable transformation in her career. Just a few months later, bandleader Les Brown heard Doris's voice and recognized her extraordinary talent. He offered her a chance to sing with his band, which opened the door to her first major hit, Sentimental Journey. From that point on, Doris Day became a household name, charming audiences with her voice and her infectious smile, all the while carrying the lessons learned from that harrowing night. The accident may have altered her path, but it didn't define her. Instead, it shaped her into the iconic figure she would become, showing the world that the show must go on, no matter the obstacles. She was a fake girl next door. Doris Day was the epitome of the girl next door in Hollywood, a bright, cheerful figure who seemed to embody innocence and charm. But let's be real, that persona was a carefully crafted image, a product of what studio executives and publicists wanted to sell to the American public. Behind all that sunshine and sweetness, Doris's life was filled with struggles that didn't quite fit the wholesome package she was expected to deliver. When Doris first hit the scene in the late 1940s, she was marketed like a dream. Films like Romance on the High Seas and Pillow Talk showcased her as the perfect, lovable heroine who always ended up with the guy. And why wouldn't they want to promote that? After World War II, people were craving stories that reaffirmed traditional values, and Doris was just the gal for the job. But here's where it gets interesting. While she was playing these roles, her real life was anything but picture perfect. Even as her career took off, Doris often found herself forced into roles that didn't resonate with her true self. After her split from Jordan, she wanted to branch out and try more serious parts, but Hollywood wasn't having it. Instead, they pushed her back into those light-hearted romantic comedies, reinforcing that sweet girl image. It was like a never-ending cycle of play the part, don't rock the boat. As the years went by, Doris started to feel suffocated by the very persona that had made her a star. By the 1960s, she was a household name, but it came with a hefty price tag of public expectations. People wanted her to keep smiling, keep being that innocent, carefree woman, even as her personal life began to unravel. From marriage problems to substance abuse, the real Doris Day was a far cry from what you saw on TV, and the executives knew this and hid this from the world. She was a punching bag. Doris Day was the golden girl of Hollywood. She was often portrayed as a bubbly, cheerful persona that made her an endearing figure on screen. But behind that sunny exterior was a darker reality, one marked by a series of awful and abusive relationships that would leave deep emotional scars. Doris's first marriage to Al Jordan, a big band musician, began with a whirlwind romance that quickly devolved into a nightmare. They married in 1946, and Doris was excited about starting a family. However, as time went on, the shadows of their relationship grew longer. Al, who struggled with his own demons, reportedly became physically violent towards Doris. This was not just limited to emotional manipulation. He was known to have hit her even while she was pregnant with their son Terry. Imagine the fear and helplessness Doris must have felt, carrying a child while facing such violence from someone she had trusted and loved. The abuse took a significant toll on Doris. It was not merely a series of physical assaults. It was an all-encompassing emotional struggle. Doris had to endure feeling trapped in a marriage where love was replaced by fear. But there was also her career to think of. The pressure to maintain her public image as America's sweetheart compounded her pain. After all, how could someone so beloved be experiencing such turmoil? This facade became an overwhelming burden, forcing her to conceal her struggles while putting on a brave face for the world. But soon enough, even Doris took a stand and said, "Enough is enough." The tipping point came when Doris realized she could no longer endure the abuse. Summoning every ounce of strength, she left Al, taking their son with her. Leaving was a significant and courageous step, but it was also the beginning of a long healing process. Doris had to confront the trauma of her past while also working hard to provide for her son. The emotional scars from the abuse lingered long after she escaped the situation. It would take years of self-discovery, therapy, and self-reflection for her to reclaim her sense of self-worth. The impact of her first marriage didn't just fade away with time. Doris often spoke about how the violence she experienced shaped her views on relationships and love. Even as she found success in her career, the shadow of her past continued to follow her. For years, she struggled with trust and intimacy, fearing that any new relationship might mirror her experiences with Al. But at another attempt at love, Doris faced an equally worse fate: sleeping with the enemy. When Doris married Martin in 1951, she believed she had found a partner who would support and love her unconditionally. Martin was not just her husband, he was also her manager, guiding her career and helping her navigate Hollywood. For many years it seemed like they were a perfect match. Doris trusted him completely, letting him take the reins on her finances and career decisions. She was focused on her work, pouring herself into singing, acting, and making films. Meanwhile, Martin was handling the business side of things, or so she thought. However, as it turned out, Martin had a darker side that Doris never fully grasped. While she was busy being America's sweetheart, he was allegedly squandering her fortune, which was estimated to be around $20 million at the time. Imagine putting your trust in someone so deeply, only to find out later that they were secretly draining your bank account. It was a betrayal of the highest order. And when Doris learned the truth after Martin's demise in 1968, it felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. After Martin passed away, Doris began to dig into their finances, and what she uncovered was nothing short of shocking. Not only had Martin mismanaged her money, but he had also kept her completely in the dark about their financial ruin. There were no warnings, no discussions about budgeting, or even any hints that they were in dire straits. Instead, Doris found herself facing the harsh reality of almost being bankrupt. The man she had trusted most had not only betrayed her financially but also emotionally, leaving her feeling lost and alone. To add insult to injury, Martin had taken it a step further by secretly signing her up for a television series, The Doris Day Show, without her knowledge or consent. He knew that this would be a major project for her, but rather than discussing it with her, he just went ahead and made the decision on his own. Her own husband had run you into the ground financially, but he also made major career moves without consulting her. It must have been infuriating for Doris, who had built her career through hard work and determination. Eventually, Doris had to pick up the pieces of her shattered financial situation, and it wasn't easy. She found herself navigating bankruptcy and financial recovery at a time when she was also grappling with the emotional fallout from Martin's betrayal. It was a real wake-up call for her, forcing her to take control of her life in a way she never had to before. She had always relied on Martin to handle the business side, but now she needed to become her own advocate and financial manager. Despite the challenges, Doris faced this new chapter with resilience. She stepped into her role on The Doris Day Show, using it as an opportunity to rebuild her career and regain her financial footing. This series became a significant part of her life, allowing her to showcase her talent to a new generation while also helping to restore her wealth. Slowly but surely, she began to claw her way back from the brink of financial disaster. Looking back, Doris often reflected on her experiences with Martin. She learned the hard way that trust, while essential in relationships, should also be accompanied by awareness and oversight. It was a painful lesson, but it ultimately shaped her into a stronger and more independent woman. She would go on to advocate for animal rights and focus on her passions, turning the page on a tumultuous chapter in her life. She was lonely. Doris Day's life really shows that fame doesn't always come with happiness. Sure, she was the charming girl next door that everyone loved, lighting up the screen and belting out catchy tunes. But behind that bright smile, she often felt more alone than you'd think. It's a real twist, because the more popular she got, the more isolated she felt. Imagine being adored by millions but still feeling lonely at night. As Doris's star began to shine in the 50s and 60s, the pressure to maintain that perfect image only grew. People saw her as this bubbly, carefree icon, but underneath she was battling feelings of isolation. While other celebs might have thrived at glamorous parties, Doris longed for something deeper, real connections with people who got her, not just her public persona. She was in this weird position where everyone loved her, but the fame made it hard to find genuine friendships. The conversations she had often felt like they were skimming the surface, and she craved those heart-to-heart talks that could really make you feel connected. The glitzy world of Hollywood sometimes felt more like a bubble that kept her from forming true bonds. Plus, being under the media's microscope didn't help. Every little thing she did was scrutinized, and her personal life became the topic of gossip. It's like she was on a stage, but the audience only saw a performance, not the person behind the curtain. The very fame that brought her adoration also made it difficult for her to share her real self. She wanted to connect with others, but she was always worried about how people would judge her. Her romantic life added to that loneliness. Her first marriage to Al Jordan was pretty rocky, and her third husband, Martin Melcher, turned out to be a huge disappointment when it came to trusting him with her finances. Those experiences left her feeling scarred and hesitant to open up to new people. She really wanted companionship, but her past made it hard for her to trust anyone. In her quieter moments, Doris reflected on her life and couldn't shake off the sadness. She'd often say that, even with all her success, she felt a void inside. Sure, she had the fame, the fan mail, and the accolades, but none of that could replace the comfort of true companionship. At times, she just wanted someone to share her life with, someone real to lean on in a world that felt so fake. But sadly, she never had that. So she poured herself into her music and acting, maybe hoping that by sharing her feelings, she could connect with others on a deeper level. Songs like Que Sera Sera really hit home, not just for her fans, but for her too. Through her performances, she sought to bridge the gap between the dazzling Doris everyone saw and the lonely woman she felt like inside. The tragic demise. Doris Day's life took a heartbreaking turn when her son, Terry Melcher, passed away. Terry was born in 1942 during her tumultuous first marriage to Al Jordan. As a child, he was surrounded by all Hollywood had to offer, and Doris was fiercely protective of him. She worked hard to give him a stable upbringing, especially considering the chaos she faced in her own life. Terry grew up to become a talented music producer and songwriter, working with some of the biggest names in the industry, like the Byrds and Paul McCartney. He had his own share of success and seemed to be carving out a unique identity in the music world, separate from his mother's enormous shadow. Doris was incredibly proud of him and often spoke about how talented he was, which must have brought her immense joy given the struggles she faced in her relationships. However, the dark clouds of tragedy loomed over their family. In 2004, Terry was diagnosed with skin cancer, and Doris watched helplessly as her beloved son battled the disease. It was a devastating blow for her, as she had already endured so much heartache throughout her life, including abusive relationships and the pressure of fame. Terry fought hard, but the cancer took its toll, and he passed away in November 2004 at the age of 62. The loss of her son was like a devastating earthquake in Doris's life, shaking her to the core. She was deeply affected by his passing, feeling an emptiness that words could hardly describe. Doris often reflected on her relationship with Terry, emphasizing how close they were and how they leaned on each other throughout their lives. After losing him, she poured her grief into her work and her love for animals, dedicating her energy to animal rights activism. It was as if she sought to channel her pain into something positive, honoring Terry's memory by continuing to make the world a better place.